Hello everybody, Trevor here, and welcome to a brand new top video. You know, when it comes to the Thomas the Tank Engine TV series, I always love listening to the wonderful, whimsical narration of the narrator. Some narrators are pretty good, while others are just, meh. Sadly, starting with Big World Big Adventures, we will no longer be having a narrator, we'll just have Thomas narrating the stories instead. But no, let's not talk about that. Let's talk about something positive instead. Today, we're going to talk about my top 3 best Thomas the Tank Engine narrators of all time. For this list, I'm only going to include the TV series narrators. So that means no Railway series narrators and no narrators of any other Thomas book. And no, I am not going to include this guy either. So anyway, let's begin. Number 3.
Well, I tell you, it wasn't her fault. You'll find in life that often things go flipping over and falling down and piling up, and it's not always somebody's fault.
Ringo Starr, the former Beatles drummer, and the very first narrator of Thomas and Friends. What I like about Ringo Starr is his friendly and enthusiastic voice. He's the kind of guy who would read you bedtime stories when you're a little kid. I mean, just listen.
Never mind that, replied Thomas. I've something important to say. Do you realize it's a whole year since Mrs. Kindly saved us from a nasty accident? You remember when she was ill in bed and... Yes, of course, interrupted Edward. You told us how she waved her red dressing gown out of her window to warn you about a landslide ahead.
And you and Toby gave her presents. Percy joined in, and Sir Topham Hatt sent her to Bournemouth to get better.
But, said James and Henry together, the rest of us have never thanked her properly. Exactly, said Thomas. So now I think we should all give her a special Christmas party.
Thank you for arranging these, Diesel. I must go now. Don't you want this lot? No, thank you. Diesel gulped. And I've taken all this trouble. Why didn't you tell me? You never asked me. Besides, said Duck, you were having such fun being Rev whatever it was you said. Goodbye. Diesel had to help the workmen clear the mess.
This is also the guy who made seasons 1 and 2 so great in the first place, but the reason why he's so low on this list is because most of his impressions sound exactly the same, and I'm perfectly fine with that, but the biggest problem I have with him is that in the original UK version of season 1, he mostly sounds monotone. I mean, just listen.
He was almost there when... And there was Gordon going slower and slower in a cloud of steam. His driver stopped the train. While the guard went to find one, they uncoupled Gordon, who had enough puff to slink onto the siding out of the way. The fat controller leaned out of the window to wave at Edward and Henry. But the train was going so fast that his hat blew off into a field where a goat ate it for tea.
Luckily, in the US, Ringo was asked to re-record some of his lines in order to make season 1 more expressive than ever. I'm going to play a few clips from the US version of this episode, and I want you guys to tell me which version do you think is better.
He was almost there when... And there was proud Gordon going slower and slower in a cloud of steam. His driver stopped the train. While the conductor went to find one, they uncoupled Gordon, who had enough puff to slink onto the siding out of the way. Sir Topham Hatt leaned out of the window to wave at Edward and Henry, but the train was going so fast that his hat blew off into a field, where a goat ate it for tea.
You see? This is why I like the US version better. But overall, Ringo Starr gave the series a really great start, and I wish he stayed a little longer just so he can re-narrate Whistles and Sneezes, as well as the rest of season 2 in the US version. Number 2, and I'm not going to make a lot of friends with my next choice.
Oh, Mr. Conductor, are you all right?
Yes, Thomas, but sometimes everything happens at once. I have to see Sir Topham Hatt to get my orders right away. The journey from Shining Time keeps getting bumpier and bumpier.
Does it?
Yes, I know I'm gonna get a lot of backlash for saying this, but I actually love Alec Baldwin as the narrator for seasons 5 and 6. The reasons why he's on the number 2 spot is, well, for one thing, he made those 2 seasons sound more suspenseful, dramatic, and exciting.
Night came. Toby looked anxiously around. Everything seemed rather spooky. Quite suddenly, he heard a strange wheezing sound. "It's the ghost!" he wailed. "What ghost?" his driver asked. "It's the old warrior. He's come to hunt me down." When Thomas was by himself, every sound and every shadow was spooky. He was beginning to feel very scared. "There's no such thing as ghosts," he said nervously. "Who's there?" Thomas was so busy looking for ghosts, he didn't watch where he was going. The chains felt like ghost fingers. "Something's got me!" Thomas wheeshed and set off an old steam whistle. "The ghost whistle," said Thomas, and he raced away as fast as his wheels could carry him.
The second thing is, I thought some of his impressions were really spot on. In fact, let me show you some of my favorites.
Oliver wanted to help. "You're a very useful brake van, Toad. You help me brake, and you keep my freight cars in order when we go down hills." "I know, Mr. Oliver, but it would be so exciting to go forwards for a change instead of always seeing things sliding away from me." "Oh, thank you, sir," said Stepney. "Shall I be away long?" "Are these my cars?" asked Stepney. "The more the merrier." Then a voice boomed from inside the shed. "Do you mind? I'm trying to sleep." "So you're the little puffer that's broken down," she sniffed. "That would be vintage steam truck," snapped Elizabeth. "And I haven't much time to get to your coupling rods." "Oh, it's you," said Elizabeth, looking down at Sir Topham Hatt. "Have you learned to drive properly yet?" "I don't need help," boomed Byron. "Try Kelly the Crane."
However, some of his other voices aren't that great in my opinion. For example, his Bill and Ben impressions from season 5. I get that he's trying to be like George Carlin, but I think Carlin does a much better job when it comes to the Tank Engine twins because Baldwin made them sound pretty annoying.
"That's my line of cars," huffed Bill. "It's not. It's mine," snorted Ben. "Yours is over there. It's mine. It's not. It's mine. It's not."
Another biggest problem I have with Alec Baldwin is that he doesn't even try to give Darwin and Douglas Scottish accents, when in reality, they are supposed to be Scottish.
"Stop being pushy," Donald snapped. "Don't call me pushy," Douglas snapped back. "You shouldn't have pushed me into the cart," huffed Donald. "You pulled me, you mean," argued Douglas. "Didn't. Did. Did not. Did too."
Heck, he also gave the same treatment to Duncan in season 6, even though he gave him the right accent in season 5.
"Fancy not securing your freight cars on a hill. They'll come back to spook you and your special funnel. Woo!"
"An engine's not an engine without a whistle," boasted Duncan.
"Haunted bridge. Rubbish," snorted Duncan. "It's as tame as a pet rabbit."
"They're jealous of my fine whistle," Duncan huffed, as he steamed through the countryside. He whistled at some sheep, but they were too busy eating grass to take notice. "Bah," said Duncan. "I need to whistle louder and longer next time."
So let me get this straight, Baldwin. You can give Duncan a Scottish accent in season 5, but you can't in season 6? Bullcrap! But aside from those problems, he's a really good narrator and a great actor in general. But I wouldn't exactly consider him a good person in real life. Before I unveil my number 1 pick, here are a couple honorable mentions. Pierce Brosnan. I decided not to include him on the list because, although he is a good actor, but the only problem with his narration was that his deep voice is very hard of hearing at times. But to be honest, I'd rather have him narrate seasons 12 through 16 as originally planned, instead of bringing back the two Michaels. Mark Morgan. Now don't get me wrong, I like this guy. I think he's technically better than Michelangelo and Michael Brandon, but the only small problem I have with him is that he sounds a bit similar to Michelangelo's. I get that's the idea, but I was kind of expecting a new narrator that sounds completely different from the previous ones, like Jim Cummings or even Tom Kenny for examples. Also, I want this list to be a top 3 so that it'll be shorter and much more sweet as possible. But hey, at least he doesn't narrate as slowly as Michelangelo's did. And finally, the moment you've all been waiting for. The #1 best Thomas narrator is...
Well, when those bees come to the flowers for pollen, they'll be covered with forgetting dust. Then they'll forget that they're bees and won't sting anyone for a while.
You knew this was coming, didn't you? And yes, I have to agree that George Carlin is the absolute best Thomas the Tank Engine narrator of all time. He is an improvement over Ringo Starr, and I also consider him the best actor to play Mr. Conductor in Shining Time Station. Like Alec Baldwin, George Carlin times his narration perfectly, and it's much better paced than Michelangelo's.
Diesel sidled up alongside. Everyone knows that tenders are a mark of distinction, but I'm afraid that no amount of tenders will save you in the end. We Diesels are taking over, and we don't need tenders to make us important, not even one. Gordon was most upset. He was feeling just the same next day. I'm not happy.
Diesel sidled up alongside. Everyone knows that tenders are a mark of distinction, but I'm afraid that no amount of tenders will save you in the end. We Diesels are taking over, and we don't need tenders to make us important, not even one. Gordon was most upset. He was feeling just the same the next day. I'm not happy.
He's also the one who made seasons 3 and 4 so great in the first place due to his wonderful and expressive tone of voice. He also re-narrated seasons 1 and 2 after Ringo left, but unfortunately, his very last season to narrate was season 4 before he went back to his comedy routine, and that season was one of my absolute favorites from the classic series. This guy's #1 on the list because he has the most impressions, and a lot of them are really, really good.
You're a muckle nuisance, said Donald. It's to leave you behind I be wanting. Well, well, well. Surely, James, it wasn't you. You didn't say. Lord sakes, Donald, it's Henry. Don't worry yourself, Henry. Wait a while. We'll have you out.
The vicar says that not all children are able to have holidays by the sea, so he's having a garden party to raise money for a seaside trip. I'm going to be the star attraction, chatted Trevor, giving rides to all the visitors. The vicar is putting up posters all about it.
That's the 3rd load of coal you've had today, Gordon, said James. Some might say you're being rather greedy. I'm an important engine, replied Gordon. Important engines need plenty of coal, but I doubt if you would understand that, James.
You woke me up, grumbled Duke. In my young days, engines were... Keep me in order. Be off with you. Impudent scallywags. Railways are no good. Turn them into roads. Pull them up. Turn them into roads. Railways are no good. Turn them into roads. Pull them up. Turn them into roads.
Listen, Bill, said Ben. Can you hear something? What sort of something? Asked Bill. Something different, replied Ben. I can't hear anything different, said Bill. Exactly, huffed Ben. Everything is the same. Sounds the same, looks the same. What we need is a surprise. Surprise what? Asked Bill.
The butler came in.
Excuse me, sir. You're wanted on the telephone.
Also, I may not be a huge fan of his comedies, but I definitely love this.
Children, help the children. What about the children? Save the children. You know what I say? Fuck the children. Fuck them. They're getting entirely too much attention. And I know what you're thinking. You say, Jesus, he's not going to attack children, is he? Yes, he is. He's going to attack children. And remember, this is Mr. Conductor talking. I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about.
Overall, George Carlin was fantastic. And although it was very sad that he died in 2008, but he will always be loved and remembered by us older fans as the #1 best Thomas the Tank Engine narrator of all time. Well, that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe if you want to. This is Trevor Davis, and I hope you all have a great day.